Hi, Nathan here from PH Studios, and welcome back to another C# video. In this video, we're going to discuss some debugging elements. We're going to discuss how to use the debugging tool, what benefits it has, and what you can accomplish with it. For this video, I'm going to use my tower defense code as an example on how it can be useful for finding the problem. You can use other things. It's useful for like business applications, like a banking application and stuff like that, where you are expecting a value, but you're getting a completely different result. So you want to go in the debugger and find out what's happening in the code that would produce this result. So that's what the debugger is for. Let's say you're expecting a number 20, but you get 9,987. That's a massive mistake in terms of a banking application, so you want to find out what that 9,000, how that 9,000 is getting to your method or how it's being generated. So sometimes it's like a simple addition, multiplication, stuff like that. Maybe you are having issues with your for loop and you're doing it 20 iterations instead of 10 or something like that. And that's what the debugging tool can figure out. Okay, so I purposely broke my tower defense game, and I'm going to show you what's happening. If you have not seen my tower defense game, take a look at this screenshot, any of these screenshots. You will see on the right side information like money available, place towers, basic tower, low cost, all that stuff. So you'll see text on the right, along with the little thumbnail of the tower, and buttons at the bottom right. So I purposely broke the game to where it will not display any text on the right. It will just display the button and pretty much all the buttons, buy, cancel, so any button will be displayed. So the issue is, how do I find out what's causing this? Now, you can debug your entire application. You can go to, you first need to determine if it's with the game or the engine. So you'll want to go into your game and just start debugging from the very basic update and draw logic. So the thing is, it's drawing that's causing the issue. So you can debug the entire process and step through each call, but that would take several hours to find the solution. So you have to do some thinking to try to narrow it down. So let's think for a minute. On the right side, we are not getting any text. We see buttons. We know that the blocks are displayed. If you look on the right side, you'll see the little borders. That is a block of controls that we have. So we know that the controls are being displayed, so we know that the main container works. The only problem is text is not being displayed. So we narrowed it down to just text. So we can look at the game, we can look at the play screen, and let's look at the draw logic here. So we have a draw screen, and we just draw one thing, user interface. So let's set a breakpoint here. Now let me press F5. Alright, and I paused the video because I turned off the audio and music. Alright, so now we'll play and pick a level. Alright, so now it went to the debugging and it stopped at that breakpoint. So now we can step through it. Now we have a whole bunch of controls here. They might be different. They might be up here, or anywhere else. I like to keep it in its own line. You can drag it on the far left side. You'll see the dots. And then when you hover over that, you'll get the cross cursor. That means that you can move this around. You can reorder it, move it around. And I like to keep it on a single line by itself. Now we get some controls here. We can play, which will continue. It will run the program until it reaches that breakpoint again. So in the next game loop, it'll encounter that breakpoint again, and it will throw us back in the debugger. We can stop, which means it will stop the program, and it will close it out. This button will restart. It'll stop and then start it again. The ones you'll use most often are these three buttons here. Step into, step over, and step out. Step into will step into a method that you're hovering, that you're currently have it highlighted in the breakpoint. Step over means that if there are any method calls, it will not go in them. It will step over them to the next line in the current method. Step out will exit the current method, and it will break on the outside of that. So I click step out, and now it broke, and now it's at the base.draw line, the line after that, which is just the ending semicolon. So I'm going to click continue again to come back to the next game loop, and then it will go back there. Now step over, like I said, if there are any method calls, it will not go into them. It'll just continue on with the method, and then it will be done. Step into, it will go into those methods. So we're going to click that one because we want to investigate the user interface. Alright, so now we go to the user interface and look at the drawing UI. Okay, so this will list us the draw logic for the map region, the wave information, and the command info bar. The map and the wave information are drawing fine, so let's add a breakpoint here. We do not need to investigate the map region and wave information. Since those are drawing fine, we can go into this. So I'm going to click continue here, and it will jump to that line. Now I'm going to step into. Alright, so the command info bar draws, like you saw there, it will draw the money information, the towers that we can buy, and all of our buttons. So it's not drawing any text at all. So this line, the next line, should tell us what is going on because it's trying to draw the money information. So sprite-batch.draw, it's drawing the background. We do not need to investigate it. The background is drawing fine, so we can step over that. And then let's investigate this one. Now this one is wanting to draw text, and now if you're using the debugger tool, you can hover over any of the fields, attributes, variables, properties, anything like that, and you can see what is in those. If you're hovering over an object, you'll see that the object's data, and then you can look at what those values are at this current line. So as you see, I do have text here. I want to display the money, and it's using the available money as 300, but it's not displaying. So I know that it's in my object. I hover over money and towers. I know that my text is on there. So the issue has to be the drawing logic because the object has that data. So let's step into those. Okay, so now we go into the class UI block. And now we are stepping into the draw method on there. And now we can investigate these, what's passed in, and that's appropriate. That's 60 frames per second. That's the right time. And then the sprite batch, and then the sprite font. And then you can investigate that, see if it's, for example, see if that's what you expect. And then we can do these. Now, as you see, I mentioned I purposely broke my tower defense game. I commented these out, so I purposely broke it. So let's see what's going on here. It's trying to draw the entry, the text entry, and it's trying to draw that by using the sprite batch, the value font, sprite font. Now you can hover over these after you go into the iteration. So once it gets to that line, you can hover over it, and then you can see if the font is null, so it's going to draw with the sprite font. Alright, that looks fine, but look at the color. So there's our problem. Our color is not being initialized. So you can do some changes. You can go back and find out why is your color not initialized. And in that case, that's what I wanted. I do not initialize the color in this example because I'm using the sessions color. As you see, I purposely broke it, so I need to unbreak it. So once I unbreak my purposely broken code, you'll see I now get my text, and everything is fine. So that was the debugger, and you can find out lots of issues with that. You'll use those tools at the top. Step into a method call, and you will be able to investigate the code and logic in that method call itself and find out if the problem is inside that method. Step over, it will not go into the method. It will continue on the current method, and it will skip over going into that method. Step out will ignore all future lines in that method and will step out to the previous call on the stack. Oh, let me go ahead and talk about that for a minute. I'm going to set up a breakpoint here. I'm going to pause the recording so I can turn off the sound. Alright, so I turn off the sound and I'm ready to play, and it will stop at that breakpoint. So at the bottom here, you will see two windows here, locals and call stack. You might have different ones. You can get to the other ones by going to the debug window and looking at the windows section here. So there's locals and call stack. Alright, so let's discuss locals. Now remember, I mentioned a couple minutes ago that you can hover over the objects, variables, fields, properties, whatever you want, and get information from it in a hover over text. And then you can go in depth, look at the base, blend factor, all this stuff, and see all of its information. At the bottom here, let me expand that here. That will give you it's similar, except that you're not hovering over it. You're doing it in a dedicated window, and then you can increase it and get all the information. Like, again, I went and did the blend factor, but it's not a hover over text. It's just in its own window, and I can expand on that, or I can just look at a specific part of it. So that's the locals. And that will give you information like an integer, what's the value it has. Look at the object information, what does its properties and fields contain, and all that stuff. What is its state currently? Is the mouse state, does it have a click object? No, it's set to null here. What is its current state? 0, buttons none, wheel 0. So nothing's pressed. And all that stuff. So you can get all the information at this current line here, what the state of the objects are. So that's what the locals are for. The call stack on the right side tells us the hierarchy of what called it. So at the very bottom, we have external code, and then above that, you should have some code that you should recognize from your program. That is the main method. Almost always the main method will be second, unless you have a lot of external code elsewhere. But one of your first things that you developed is your main method. So if you look at that, that's the call stack, the very first thing that we can see. External code, we can't go into it, but this one we can. So the first thing that we can see is typically the main method. Alright, so now we go up. When we go up to the call stack, it's at the base.draw line here. Alright, now we go up again. Now it's at the play screen.draw screen. It's drawing the user interface. Now we go up, and it's at the user interface.draw UI, and that's the call stack. So that's pretty much it for a quick introduction on the debugging tool. You can use it for very important things with trying to find out what issues you have with your code. For example, you're expecting a value, but you're getting a completely different one, like I mentioned at the beginning. You want to investigate how that different value is being generated. Is it a mathematical error? Is it a state error? Is it is it a iteration error? You can investigate that with the debugging tool. And then you want to narrow it down as best you can. Like I did at the beginning of this video, I narrowed it down to everything was fine except for the text was not displaying. The buttons were displaying, the map was displayed, and the wave information was displayed. It was just that command info bar user interface section that was not displaying. That allowed me to step ahead of the debugging process, so I did not have to debug the entire program from the game.run method. So you want to do some investigation before you start debugging as to where to narrow it down. A bank application, for example. You're submitting a transaction. A person types in $100 for a transaction. All of a sudden, they get $100,000 taken out of their bank account. So you need to investigate how are those extra zeros being generated. You need to narrow your scope to it's a transaction. Everything else is fine. When they look at their bank details, they can see their balance just fine. They're not getting any extra zeros there. So it's just when they issue a transaction, and that's where you can focus your debugging time instead of debugging the entire program. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this quick tutorial. The next C# quick tips is going to discuss object-oriented principles like encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. So I hope to see you next time.